A few years ago, my wife and I were in the market to buy a home. Now, if you've ever had this experience, you know that it involves going to open houses, researching towns, looking at images of houses and layouts online, creating a must-have list, and so much more. But our goal, however, was to find a home that had, as my wife put it, good bones, where we could simply have family and friends over during the year. Her theory was that if we could find a house that was built well, we could make it into what we wanted. It wasn't about how fancy the inside was or the paint colors or decorations, but rather more about the build quality and structure of the house itself. Eventually, we chose a home that was sound and ready for our own personal touches. And it took us a couple of years to turn that home into what it is today. See, that home now, we know, has a firm foundation to help the house last for years to come. It's a home that can welcome family and friends to gather throughout the year, and it's one that can offer guests a place to stay if they need it. And of course, as a bonus, we even made a little area that our pup Nesta can call his own. See, how we set up our classrooms, specifically how we integrate technology into our classrooms, in my opinion, is very similar to creating a home with our own personal touches included. Now, my name is Chuck Poole. I am a teacher who just finished my 23rd year in the classroom, and I love it. I'm also the VP of Communities here at McGraw Hill, which gives me a unique opportunity to connect with my fellow teachers year-round inside of our amazing communities. But today, our time together is going to focus on how to implement technology into the classroom in such a way that hopefully it will make your life a little bit easier and your teaching more enjoyable. And by the end of this session, my hope is to give you a solid and simple technology implementation plan that you can adjust to suit your needs and style regardless of your comfort level using technology. And that simple technology implementation plan really has three parts that I'm going to talk about today. Number one, how to build a firm foundation when implementing technology. Number two, how to welcome students in to experience the technology tools that they're going to be using during the year. And then number three, how to gather student feedback to make improvements where needed. And each section is going to focus on one area of your house that you're building and then give you a few reflection questions to think about. Now, you can pause the video when those questions pop up at the end of each section to begin your reflection on how you can utilize what was just discussed. So I want to start by talking about the most important part of the house, the foundation. When plans are being laid out for a new home, the architect and builders spend a lot of time on the foundation. If the foundation's not sound, problems are going to happen throughout the building process, which can cause the entire project to fail over time. Now, a weak foundation may not cause immediate issues, but it will eventually result in a home that can come crumbling down unexpectedly. Now, as teachers, we know that setting a firm foundation for our classes is critical. And establishing strong routines, relationships, rules, and procedures that let our students know what to expect each day will lead to success. And if we spend time on these routines at the start of the year, our year can go much smoother. But in today's classroom, technology has become part of the process. And oftentimes, how we implement it into our daily routines can be an afterthought or based on the assumption that our students are digital natives and therefore they're going to know what to do. But if you want to implement technology effectively and efficiently, I would recommend making it part of your classroom foundation overall. So in this first section of our session, I'm going to walk you through how I infuse a few rules and routines in my classroom to help the use of technology flow smoothly. And as I go through these samples, I want you to think about your rules and routines and how they can be included in the first step of this implementation plan, the foundation. Now, you can feel free to steal any of my ideas or modify them to fit your needs as well if you like. So first, I'm going to start with the 3 rules that I use in my class and how technology expectations are seamlessly built in. Now, after 23 years in the classroom and tons of reading and research, and of course, a lot of trial and error, I've come up with 3 simple rules that I use in my class, outside of our full school building or department rules that are standard. And what I've found is when it comes to classroom rules, We want them to be effective and efficient. And in order for that to happen, they must be able to do three things. Number one, be easily enforced when needed. Number two, be easily understood by students. And number three, be easily remembered by students. So the three rules that I have come to use in my classroom are as follows. Respect, focus, take pride. That's it. These three things encompass almost everything I need from my students in order for them to succeed. And they're broad enough to be used in most situations, yet simple enough to explain, understand, and be enforced. And they also can easily be intertwined with my technology integration. So let me explain what I mean so that you could see how these three rules play an essential first step in my technology implementation plan. Now, respect, well, that basically means that my students are to respect themselves, others, their space, technology, and their teacher. And when we take time early to discuss what I mean by respect, we also focus on respecting technology and its use in our classroom. Now, this allows an expectation to be set, as well as measurable guidelines that I can hold my students to throughout the year. Now, focus, that basically means I expect my students to remain focused at the task at hand. So when using technology, the goal is to focus on the tool or task that they're using without venturing off into the unknown. Now, teaching middle school, I have students that love to explore games, YouTube, other sites that they shouldn't be on. But I implement this rule in conjunction with one of my classroom incentive strategies to help maintain expectations. Now, explaining some of those incentive structures are probably for another time since it could be a session all its own, but they do work well with this rule when used together. But if you have an incentive strategy, a point system, or a classroom management plan that works, I would recommend combining it with your technology integration plan so that you could help enforce the rules or expectations that you want your students to meet. Now, my third rule, take pride, basically means that no matter what you present, whether it's the work you do, your ideas, your thoughts, or yourself, always take pride in what you're doing. And when it comes to integrating technology into this rule, we discuss the importance of recognizing obstacles that have been overcome, or new tools that we've mastered, or helping a friend understand how to use a specific tool properly, and then taking pride in what they've done. So basically, in summary, in the realm of technology, these rules will remind my students to respect the technology tools and devices they're using, to focus on the task at hand when they're using them, and to take pride in what they've accomplished through using the tools that they're given. It really does work well. Now, they're very easy to enforce. My students clearly know if they break one, and they know what the consequences are. So now that you understand my simple rules, I want you to think about the rules that you have for your classroom. Have you considered how the technology and tools that you use throughout the year fit into these rules? And if you have, that's great. You're ready to start thinking about the second part of setting the foundation. But if you haven't, that's okay. I've been there, and I will tell you that once I took this into consideration, my classes have run a lot smoother each year as the technology becomes more prevalent. So I encourage you to consider it as you plan your class rules. Now, once you have your rules set and the use of technologies intertwined throughout, I think that you're ready now to start thinking about the next aspect of the foundation that you're setting: how to direct students and avoid chaos. And so here's a side note. I teach middle school, and I've had my share of chaotic days where I felt like I was lost or that I lost control. And it's in those days that I feel the most stress and overwhelm. So I've devised a plan and something that works for me and my middle schoolers to help them adhere to my focus rule when using tech. And one of the most significant issues I found and struggle with personally is staying focused when there's a device in front of me. So if I struggle with this, I can only imagine how my 11 and 12-year-olds are handling it. So the next step, after rules are in place for that foundation, is to provide a structure that's easy to follow. A structure that offers a clear indication that the time they're about to spend using the technology tool or device is to be spent in complete focus. Now, I understand that some redirection may be needed at first when this structure is implemented, but over time, I've found that adding a structure like this into our technology use has made all the difference. So basically, I use music to guide movement in my class and small time segments throughout my lessons to help students adhere to expectations. So let me explain what I mean. The movement inside my classroom is smooth, and it relies on a music cue to alert students to where they should be and how they'll be working. I use 30-second to 1-minute jingles to represent my room's different seating areas or task expectations. And once they're implemented, it literally takes my middle school students under 30 seconds to transition into a different space and be ready to go for what's next. Now, most of my classes have up to 27 kids, but it still works well. And I have 4 songs that I use to make this happen. Now, these 4 songs put specific things into motion in my class and offer students a routine that they expect and are comfortable using. For example, when I play Mission Impossible or the Mission Impossible theme, my students know that it's time to move immediately into their partners for the week and be ready to go before the song ends. When I play the Cagney and Lacey theme, now this is a show that I've never seen, but I thought the song was cool. Students immediately move into their independent seats and begin working. When I play the Jeopardy theme, they move into their groups immediately and begin discussion. And when I play the Password, that old game show, when I play that theme, students know it's time for them to take out their devices and get ready to use them regardless of where they might be sitting in they're sitting in their individual, group, or partner space. And then when I play that theme again, they know it's time to close the devices and get ready to move on or discuss. Now, I have these 4 song tabs on my computer, ready to play whenever I need them. And although these are simple classroom management strategies, when technology is implemented as part of the class structure overall, students have an easier time understanding what they're expected to do. Now, honestly, I spend the first week or 2 of school really honing in on our music movement process until the students fully understand it. Usually after the first week, when the song is played, they move automatically without thinking since it's so ingrained into their routine. Now, I teach my students for 45 minutes per class, so how I structure my class or lessons has to be simple and effective. But I found that wasted time on transitions or on focus can be remedied. See, my students are rarely in one of these spaces for longer than 15 minutes, which plays into their attention spans and offers less of a chance for distraction to set in, but rather for learning to occur the whole time. Now, they're constantly moving, exploring ideas throughout any given class, and oftentimes when the class ends, I hear them say things like, "Wait, the class is over?" or "Wow, that went by so fast." Now, I will say that there are times, as we all know as teachers, when things do not go to plan. There are times when specific tasks or lessons take more time than expected, or students finish early, or the ideal focus that you thought would happen didn't happen at all. And there are ways to handle each one of these situations, but overall, implementing a structure for students like this can make quite a difference throughout the year. Let me give you an example of how a lesson may go in my class. So I might start with students beginning in their groups as we learn a concept or take notes for about 15 minutes. Then I'll move them into their partners using a music cue so that they can discuss the concept and practice for about 7 minutes. Then next, this is where the technology implementation part comes into play. I'd play the technology song to indicate it was time for them to take out their devices and get ready to work on them. Now together they would work on the skill or concept using their devices for about 10 minutes. And then once that time was up, I would move them using another music cue for around 5 minutes into their individual space to demonstrate understanding of the concept that they had just explored or discussed. And they would practice with a simple task to complete independently. And then finally, I would play the technology song again to indicate it's time to end our tech time and then move back into their groups to finish the class sharing what they've learned for that day. And one thing that I always do is I always end class with a feedback strategy, which I'll share at the end of this video, to help me see if they grasped the concept, they were confused, or if I need to reteach or spend more time on it. Now, by implementing a specific song for device use into the overall routine, students feel comfortable understanding their expectations. And I found that once this is implemented, it's a system that can be used in conjunction with the 3 rules that I mentioned earlier, and it saved me so much time from having to constantly tell students to stay on task or to get off games or websites that they shouldn't be on. And it really has helped them to become less distracted during class. Now, setting the foundation of your technology implementation plan can be very efficient when you tie it into what you already do to help your class run smoothly. So before we jump into the welcome portion of the plan, or step 2, where we'll chat about specific strategies to help students navigate and understand the tools, I want you to take a moment to reflect on these questions. Now, feel free to pause the video as you write down any ideas or reflect on how you can use some of these ideas to help your implementation go well. So here are your questions. Number 1, how can you set up your rules and procedures in such a way that integrating and using technology becomes part of the fabric of the class itself? Number 2, what structures do you have in place already to help manage your class? And how could technology become a seamless part of that structure? Once a firm foundation is set in any home, the rest of the levels can be built. Now, in my home, for example, our first floor is where we host people and welcome them. It's where our kitchen is, as well as our family room, and those are the 2 places that are most used when we have guests over to hang out. Now, in today's classroom, once the foundation is set, students are ready to be welcomed into learning when it comes to technology. And although they may be comfortable with using it, oftentimes they need direction in order to get the most out of it. Now, although some tech tools are designed to be simple, many will still require guidance to ensure success. Tools like Kahoot, Gimkit, or Blookit, for example, which are used for student review, are all gamified tools that students could possibly figure out quickly. However, the core tools that we use, such as our textbook software, curriculum software, or online classroom tools, as well as the devices that are in front of them every day to access everything, are things that will require direction in order for students to get the most out of them and to understand the expectations that you have for their use. So the second part of this technology implementation plan is welcoming students in and helping them feel comfortable with what they're going to be using throughout the year. So I want to just share a few things that I do to welcome my students into using technology and hopefully spark some ideas for you as you're thinking of how to work through this part of your technology implementation plan for your classroom. So just as setting routines early is critical to long-term success, so is setting up students for success when using technology. And if you're like me, you may find that the first week or 2 of school, or even longer, is filled with the challenge of remembering student names or starting the process of your rules and routines in the classroom. And I found that this is also the perfect time to incorporate a few tech routines to the students so they know exactly what to expect and use throughout the year. See, the goal is to create a pathway for them to succeed from the start. So I want to share 2 simple ideas that I use to welcome students gradually as part of my implementation plan. Now, one is given to them right away, and one is used throughout the year with every single new tool that we introduce. These 2 things are reference bookmarks and passports. Now, first, I'll just chat briefly about reference bookmarks and how I use them. Now, reference bookmarks will be based on the needs of your current students and the knowledge base that they have coming in. But basically, they are precisely what they sound like. They're physical bookmarks that you can create for students to keep handy and refer to when they have basic issues or questions. Now, I found that they have saved me a ton of time by answering simple questions that have been repeatedly asked in the past. Personally, I always start with 3 bookmarks at the start of the year based on information that I've learned through the years. And I usually have them either tape these bookmarks to the front of a notebook that they use daily or keep them in their toolboxes that we've used throughout the year. Or in some cases, I have them tape their bookmarks to the devices that they use each day. And one thing that has helped my students as well is creating these bookmarks in the form of a PDF and then pinning it to the top of our LMS system, in our case is Google Classroom, so that it's easy for them to access anytime. Now, technology reference bookmarks help welcome students into using technology because they take out the guesswork and frustration by offering shortcuts, tips, and other information or expectations that you would like them to know when it comes to tech in your class. So, some reference bookmark examples that I have found to be successful and that are easy to create would be number one, a bookmark with device expectations in the classroom on the front, and then keyboard shortcuts on the back. Or number two, top 10 tips for software or tools when you're introducing them to students. Or number three, this one's a big one, an extra time approved sites bookmark to avoid online wanderers when they finish work early. Or you could have a FAQ bookmark where you answer maybe the top 5 questions that you know your students consistently have. For example, a few generic questions that I always seem to get would be as follows. Number one, what happens if my device stops working? Number two, if I forget my device at home, what do I do? Number three, what do I do if I accidentally break my device? And there's a couple more, but those are the main 3. Now, you could also create a how-to bookmark with simple instructions on how to complete some simple tasks that you know they're going to ask. For example, you could create a bookmark that talks about how to turn in assignments online into your LMS system, or how to clear cookies and cache on the devices in case you may need that sometime in the future. You could even create a how to send a proper email to teachers and friends, or other digital citizen tips. But I like to make sure to focus on my top 3 to 4 how-tos for these bookmarks that add the most value for my students. Now, the nice thing about reference bookmarks is you can use as many or as little as you like depending on what your students need. Now, I do find that the most widely used technology reference bookmarks in my class are the ones that offer shortcuts to help. And in many cases, my students use them so much early on, they become memorized over time. Now, many times the reference bookmarks are very much a teacher-created resource, but they can be made by crowdsourcing the content that is most needed from your students by simply asking them their biggest struggles or their questions. With my middle schoolers, I always hold a all you know, wish I knew session at the start of the year where they do a brain dump of every tech tip they know, followed by a list of things they wish they knew. And I get some pretty interesting insight from this simple activity, but I also gather a lot of content that can help them throughout the year as I create these bookmarks. Now, a second way to easily welcome students into technology throughout the year would be by implementing a passport system into your technology integration. See, I use the passport system. You may use something similar, but my students love it. See, the students that we teach today are very tech savvy, yet many times they're clueless on how to use tools that are going to help them further their learning, and they can get very easily frustrated when they don't understand a tool that they need to use. So one thing that I do when introducing a new tech tool or a device to students is to provide them a way for them to travel through the tool itself. See, in any given year, my students will learn and master 10 to 15 different tech tools that we use consistently to help them go deeper in their learning. So from understanding our LMS system or online textbook inside out, to learning tools used to create images, books, videos, and more, my students use our passport system to prove mastery. And I use these throughout the year as I introduce tech tools, devices, and skills. See, each tool or skill that we learn essentially is a new destination. And once mastered, students love getting their passport stamped, which in my case is either an old-fashioned self-inking stamp I picked up on Amazon or simply my signature in the passport itself. For example, anytime I introduce a new tool, I create a scavenger hunt that students go through to help navigate the tool or site. And many of the issues that students have early is getting frustrated when they cannot find things. They end up clicking around, and after about 5 minutes, they lose interest and open new tabs and go on to random sites. And that is what I want to avoid. So my passport system basically works this way. Number 1, a new tool is introduced. 2, students complete a scavenger hunt based on one aspect of the tool to help break it down. Number 3, They then use that aspect of the tool to complete a task. Number 4, each tool, depending on the complexity, will have 3 to 4 mini scavenger hunts that break down different aspects that they need to understand. Number 5, once they've completed the scavenger hunts and tasks related to the tool, they receive a stamp or signature on their passport to prove mastery. And see, with my passports, each tool is represented by a country. And for every country students travel through, they're rewarded through one of my incentive systems, which they absolutely love. By the end of the year, students will have traveled through at least 10 countries or more. And we do a lot of cool extra things with those as well. But whether you use a passport system like this one, or scavenger hunts to walk through different tools, or something completely different, the key to welcoming students into specific tools is to simply take your time. And by spending a few minutes each day when introducing a new tool to walk through one aspect at a time, it will allow students to fully understand what they need to know and feel comfortable using the technology you need them to master. See, reference bookmarks to start the year and passports to use throughout the year are ways that I welcome students into the technology that we're going to be using all year long. Spending time helping students walk through a tool will pay dividends when using it in your teaching and in your learning. So before we move to the final floor, our last part of the tech implementation plan, where we offer students the chance to give feedback on their understanding and reflect on their needs when it comes to the technology they're going to be using through the year, I just want you to take a minute to pause the video and reflect on these simple questions. Number 1, what are the biggest issues your students tend to have when using technology? Is there a way to help them tackle or overcome these issues from day one? Are there any reference bookmarks you can create or something similar that could help? And number 2, how can you welcome your students slowly into new tech tools that you plan on using throughout the year? Is there a system that you can implement to make this happen? A strong technology implementation plan needs to have a firm foundation, a way to welcome students into deeper understanding of the tools that they're going to be using, and then finally, a chance to offer feedback in order for you to consistently improve their experience. Now, in my home, our second floor is where we have room for our guests to stay whenever they need a place of refuge. Our students, regardless of how tech savvy they may be, need to have a place where they feel safe to give honest feedback and seek refuge themselves sometimes. For many students, they never get the chance to give honest feedback on how much they've grasped or what they truly need from their teachers. And by offering a way for students to give feedback on their progress and understanding, you can help them grow and use technology in an even more effective way. See, when it comes to infusing tech into the classroom, it is crucial to understand how well students have mastered tools before moving on to something new. And although some strategies like my passport system I just talked about or something similar can give you an idea of how they're doing, the only true way to see how comfortable students are with using any tools is to ask them. Now, there are 2 things that I use on a regular basis to accomplish this. And the key is to come up with something that does not take up too much time out of your class, but still provides valuable information. And the 2 strategies that I use pretty much every day are the emoji box feedback strategy and the roll and reflect feedback strategy. See, the emoji box is my most popular feedback system that I've added into my technology integration. Now, this is something that I use every single day, and it gives the students an opportunity to offer honest feedback anonymously. See, it's based on the happy or not machines that you might see in airports or theme parks or places like that. Now, the machines are a little bit too expensive and complicated for my classroom, so I decided to grab an old shoebox and make one myself. Basically, I cut 3 slots, glued down 3 dividers inside the box at each slot, and grabbed some chips at the craft store for students to use with the box each day. See, I think it's something that is super easy to make and yet powerful for students, and they honestly love using it each day and it's become part of their routine. See, the way it works is as follows. First, I pose a question based on what was covered or explored that day. Students then take a chip and place it in one of the slots: a smiling emoji, a thinking emoji, and a straight-faced or sad emoji. See, the slots represent either full understanding, a little confusion and have questions, or completely confused and lost. And once students leave class or place their chips in the box, I simply lift the lid to check where they're going or where they are. And if the majority of chips are in the smiling emoji slot, I know I can move forward. If they're in the questioning emoji slot, I know I need to pause and address things the next day. And if they're mainly in the sad face slot, I know I probably need to reteach and go over the concept again before moving forward. So basically, at the end of each class, each day, I take 2 minutes and post a question for students to answer in one of these 3 ways based on what was taught in the classroom. And the box is located by the door of my class, and students place chips into the slot of the box that best represents what they understood for that day or at the end of the lesson. And I use this for technology integration as well as many other aspects of my class throughout the year. But for technology, whenever we are implementing a new tool, the question will focus on what we worked through that day regarding the tool. Now, this has enabled me to know when we need more time to master a specific tool and when we do not need to master that tool because it's already done. And it doesn't embarrass the students at all because it offers them an anonymous way to give immediate feedback after learning something new. And they can be completely honest without fear or frustration or any anxiety. Now, the second feedback strategy that I've implemented into my technology implementation plan is my roll and reflect strategy. The way it works is as follows. Number 1, after students complete working with a tech tool for the day, they're given a dice. They simply roll the dice, and each number on it represents a question that they're going to answer and reflect on based on what they did that day. So students go through a few rolls to drive a discussion, and anytime they roll the same number, for example, more than once, they simply re-roll or go deeper into that question. Now, once they've completed a roll and reflect session, the full class will then debrief together. Now, there are a few ways that I go about using this, so here are 2 simple examples. Sometimes I use it in partners or groups, where students roll the dice at their tables and use the number that is rolled to discuss the prompt that matches it. This allows for different discussions to happen throughout the classroom, and I simply walk around and listen to those discussions because it can give me a good idea of what they understand and any issues that they have. I also use it as a full class. Sometimes I'll even use a digital dice on a website that I found, but based on the number that's rolled, the class can discuss together. And you can use the turn and talk strategy to start a conversation and then bring them back as a whole class, or you could simply discuss as a full group from the start. But by the end, you should have a pretty strong idea of how well the students have grasped the concept for the day. See, by giving students a chance to reflect on what they've learned alongside their classmates, deeper learning can occur naturally. See, oftentimes, through this reflection process, students are given the opportunity to clarify things to one another, which often is better than what I could probably do myself. See, the key to using a feedback strategy when implementing it into your technology plan is to make it simple and student-friendly. Whether you use something like the emoji box for anonymous feedback or the roll and reflect strategy for deeper reflection, the important thing is to give students a chance to be honest with you in order to provide what they need most. So before we wrap things up, I just want you to take a minute to pause the video and reflect on these 2 questions regarding your feedback strategy in your implementation plan. Number 1, how do you currently offer students a way to give feedback to you about their learning when it comes to technology or anything else? And then number 2, what can you implement today that will be successful in your technology implementation plan for your classroom? What will be included in your foundation, in your welcome stage, and in your feedback stage as you go about your plan? See, overall, when building a technology implementation plan for your classroom, you want to take into consideration how you can infuse what you already do with your rules and routines to form a firm foundation of technology use. How to welcome students to each technology tool or device that they use throughout the year. And how to offer students a chance to give feedback on what they understand and need most. So as we end this session, I hope that you will take the time to think about your rules, routines, and feedback strategies and how they can be infused into your technology plan. Because if it's part of how the class functions naturally, you will have more success than if you treat technology as a separate entity altogether.